We are looking all year long at how God surprises us. This is one of His surprises, wonderful surprise. This morning we're going to look at a surprise that happened when somebody wanted to hang somebody else. Now that's kind of a strange kind of surprise, a hanging party. I don't suppose any of us have been at an execution or when anybody has been trying to hang somebody. I hope that's not the case. I will say this. When I was probably 11, 12 years old, I was playing football with a bunch of guys. We had our own team, the Pinecrest Giants, and we would go down by the creek bed, and there was a field, and our team was pretty decent, touch football team, and there was a new kid that showed up. This new kid was not necessarily accepted by the rest of us. In fact, we would tell him to go out for a pass and keep on sending, and then say it's too far and have him run back and stick our foot out, and he'd trip over. You know what kids are like? You know what? And we finally ended up picking this kid up and throwing him into the creek. And that memory sort of haunts me, because it was me being a part of that group that was doing this kind of bullying to this other kid. And I'm the good guy. You know, I'm one of the good guys in my mind. And yet, you know what I think happens for all of us? There's this thing called sin that gets inside of us. And sometimes there's just a little thought, maybe a whole lot of thoughts in another area, but there's little thoughts that have lodged in our heads, and they become little seeds. You talk about good seeds. There are also some seeds that produce weeds. How many of you have gardens there? Somehow the weeds keep on. It's kind of like, you plant, but it seems like it comes up more weeds than the good stuff. And I just think there's something going on there. There's something that's happened. And the Apostle Paul said, you reap what you sow. Don't be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. In fact, I think what we sow that reaps destruction is selfishness. It's self-centeredness. It's egocentricity. It's I've got to take care of myself. I don't need anyone else, and I'm not concerned about anyone else. I just want to make sure that number one is taken care of. I think that seed is deep inside of us. It's been planted there, and it pops out in different ways. And it leads to destruction. It destroys community. It destroys relationship. It destroys everything that you're talking about, Prescott. It's just the kind of seeds that produce weeds that is going on. And unfortunately, that's pretty much the story of a lot of people's lives. And in fact, you look at the Old Testament, there's so much. The challenge is so much from Moses. You're going to be blessed if you are able to have the right kind of seeds inside of you, so that you're now serving others, serving God. And you're going to be cursed if you have the wrong kind of seed inside of you, that you're serving yourself, basically. You're going to stand before the blessings and the curses. And then he said, along with his curses come these kinds of awful things. And in Deuteronomy 28 it says, because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity, therefore in hunger and thirst and nakedness and dire poverty you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand, a fierce-looking nation, without respect for the old or pity for the young. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. If you want to read a chapter in the Bible that will shake you up, read Deuteronomy chapter 28. There's some graphic scenes in that book is not for the timid. This thing called the Bible. You read that book. There are passages that you'll just say, "Wow, is that there?" And Deuteronomy 28 talks about what happens when the siege takes place. Just think about it. You got this army around your city, and there's no there's nothing coming in. There's nobody bringing clothing in, and there's nobody bringing food in, and there's nobody bringing water in. They make a description in Deuteronomy 28 about parents, good parents. People who said, these are good parents taking their own children and becoming cannibals. This is Deuteronomy 28. This is a picture. And unfortunately, this is what happened to the Israelites, to the people living in Judah later on. Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations from one end of the earth to the other. Among the nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes weary with longing, and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread, both night and day, never sure of your life. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening, and evening, if only it were morning, because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see. And of course, eventually Israel is conquered by Assyria, and Assyria is the dominant empire, and then the next dominant empire comes Babylon, and Babylon conquers Jerusalem and deports people from Jerusalem. In Psalm 137, people living in Babylon say these words: by the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. This is awful. What has happened to us is exactly what God said would happen if you sow seeds inside your life. This is what's going to happen. There's going to be consequences. And actually, Babylon's later conquered by the Persians, and the Persian capital is the capital of Susa. And so we've got this story in the Bible called the Book of Esther, and set in this time of exile, in this time of Jews being placed in this land that they desperately want to get out of, and yet in this awful situation, it seems like God is still working. And maybe the worst of situations, God is still working in ways that we don't understand. God is still working. And certainly in the book of Esther, we read about God somehow making things happen in the context that seem really surprising, unusual. Xerxes is the king, and he's a powerful guy. He's in control, and he is holding a party. In fact, you read through this book, and there's all kinds of parties, like 10 parties, banquets that are being held. And it says for a full 180 days, Xerxes displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. And when these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. And wine was served in goblets of gold, and each one different from the other. And the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restrictions, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. I grew up a teetotaler, so I didn't. How many of you know what this is like, to have no restrictions on how much you drink? And it just, I won't ask you that question. Don't answer this. But it was wild, though, I imagine. Right, Mike? Okay. 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 Susa. It's happening. 7-day party. It's people are drinking all they want to, and it says, Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. So there's two banquets going on. One for the guys, a guy banquet, and then there's a gal banquet going on. And on the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. He's saying, gosh, You know, his problem was he didn't hearken to that song. How's that go? If you want to be happy for the rest of your life, huh? How's the rest of that go? Oh, is that right? Well, anyway, something like that. And I don't know if that's a good song to sing or not, but for sure he's having problems with his beautiful wife, and so all his advisors say, well, you need to dump your wife and get a new one. And it says the king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed, and he sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in his own script, to each people in their own language. And I kind of like this next part, proclaiming that every man should be ruler over his own household. How about that? This is... No, I know. Any amens there? This is right. I've never gotten an amen out of that kind of a phrase. Amens out here. No, this is even the men are not amening that one. Okay, we'll move on. Well, it was the case, and so there needs a new queen, and he goes on a hunt, and the most beautiful gal he can find is Esther, and he doesn't realize it, but Esther is Jewish, and he probably doesn't care as long as she's good looking, and it seemed like that's all he sort of had in mind, and somebody would be sort of responsive to his wishes, and she had a family member, maybe an older cousin, uncle, something, some kind of relative named Mordecai, and Mordecai was one of those guys that liked to plant good seeds, I think, in his thought life, and his thought life, it came out in his actions, and he took care to watch out for what's going on, and he heard of a plot against the king, and he told people to, you watch out, the king's life is in danger, and the king's life was spared because of Mordecai's entering in and trying to save the king's life. And the king sort of remembered it and sort of forgot it. Any of you like this, you should send a thank you note because somebody did something, but you say, well, I'll get to that, and then it kind of fades out. Any of you fade out, your thank yous sort of fade away. Brandon probably owes a thank you note for Christmas to somebody, this is, I did get that gift. Where did that gift come from? I mean, it's still there. I still like that shirt, but I don't know where it came from. I'm sort of that way. That's why I need not only a wife to remind me. I need Becca to remind me. I needed Tracy to remind me. Tracy, by the way, that part of your job description doesn't go away just because you remind me of what I need to do, what I've forgotten to do. But this is what the king did. Just it kind of, I needed. Oh yeah, but he kind of forgot and got life got going, and so this things are happening, and life is going, and apparently, chief of staff comes along, a guy by the name of Haman, who is really rising the ladder in the king's understanding, and he is really excited about the fact that he is now, really the king really thinks the world of him, and he thinks everybody else should. So he says everybody needs to bow down when they see me, and Mordecai doesn't do it. He just says, no way am I going to do this, and so this guy named Haman is feeling his feelings are hurt because somebody isn't doing exactly what he wanted him to do. How many of us get our feelings hurt way too easily? I mean, it doesn't take much to get our feelings hurt because somebody isn't doing things quite the right way. Am I preaching at you, Mike? Well, she can listen to the tape. Well, we will inform her. But and his feelings got hurt. And how many of you do stupid stuff when your feelings get hurt? You say stupid stuff, you do stupid stuff, you get in. And how many of you kind of even build real defenses? Well, I deserve this, and you're getting angry. How many of you do this? You really start preaching at somebody in private. Now, every now and then Ann will say, who are you talking to? Well, I'm talking to that guy that made me mad. He didn't do it. He's not around. How many of you are kind of like me that way? Okay, thanks, Brandon. That guy. Ann will say this a lot of times. Who are you talking to? I'm talking to this person. And she said, you'll never say that when you see him in person. Oh, yeah, I will. Well, when we see him in person, did you say it? Oh, no. I knew you wouldn't. This is, anyways. Well, this guy was going to do it in person. He's got his mind. You're not going to make me look small. I tell you what you're going to do. I'm going to hang you by the neck. I'm going to build a gallows. I'm going to build a 75-foot gallows, and that's what I'm going to do to you. And he asked the king, King, is that okay? Do I have the right to do this? In fact, while I'm at it, he's a Jew. I might as well wipe out all the Jews in the land. We'll just have a big hanging party. And the king says, okay. And so you're the chief of staff type of guy. Go ahead. You're my main man. And Mordecai got word that this was going to happen. And he goes to Esther and he says, Esther, need some help here. Things are bad. It looks like my days are numbered, but your days might be numbered too because you're Jewish and you need to go to the king. Tell him what's going on. And she said, you can't just go to the king. This king is not the kind of guy you just go to. If you go to him and he doesn't say it's okay, you can be executed right in the spot. It's kind of the way things go in these days. He says, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But this is Mordecai's response to that. You have a calling in your life. God has put you in this particular situation for this particular point in time. He's got a calling in your life. God has appointed this time for you to act. Do not think that because you're the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Now, this is the thing. A lot of us think, well, I'm not in a royal position, so, this doesn't apply to me. But the truth of the matter is, every one of us who's breathing in oxygen right now has got a royal position in God's kingdom. You have a destiny with God someday. Each of us does. Each of us is going to be called before God someday. But he's saying right now, you are in a royal position. You have the opportunity to give me glory with your entire being right now. This is the only time that you can act right now. This is your royal moment. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with this moment in time that I've given you right now? Breathe in that air and give me glory. Breathe in that air and give me yourself, your mind, body, soul, spirit. Apostle Paul said this, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Apostle Paul wants seeds planted in our brain, in our soul, that says, you know what, I am to live by the Spirit of God, and if I live by the Spirit of God, I'm going to somehow bless the family of believers. This is part of my psyche. This is part of who I am. I bless the family of God. This is what I'm called to be, and to have those seeds planted so it reaps good fruit. But let me ask you a couple questions. Do you know what Satan is, the number one question Satan is asking you right now? Do you know what the number one question Satan is asking you right this minute? I really believe this. It's the number one question he asks us. And the question is this: are you comfortable? You know, Satan delights in your comfort, in you saying, well, I could be more comfortable this way. I could be more comfortable that way. You know, a lot of people, when we go on vacations or whatever, we talk about being pampered. Pampers are for what? Aren't they for babies? We put Pampers on babies. Have you ever talked to somebody who come back from a vacation? Well, that really wasn't really, because people didn't pamper me enough. I wasn't pampered sufficiently, adequately on my vacation. I wasn't comfortable enough. And Satan says, "Are you comfortable?" And what is Jesus asking? What's the number one question Jesus is asking you right now? I really believe it's this: are you appreciative enough? Are you thankful enough? You know, a believer basically is just a thankful person, and realizes I got to thank the Creator. I got to thank the Redeemer. I'm a thankful person. That's what a believer is all about. A really deeply spiritual believer is one who's deeply appreciative and thankful, lives out of his life of thankfulness, and that's what he shares in thanksgiving. That's what a believer is, a thankful person. Well, I think for Esther, thank God a light bulb went on. A seed was planted, the light bulb went on, something germinated in her soul. And so she replies to Mordecai, "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Now, my dad used to say this every now and then. He said, "Well, I'm going to do this if it kills me," you know. And I remember, I don't know if any of us are here. Eric was here helping build this building, and this is, I don't know, anybody else here at that time? Mike, yes. Ann, well, of course. Of course you were here. You get taken for granted, of course. This is, but I tell you what, it was 2.5 years of remodeling this building while still setting up and tearing down over at the Knights of Columbus. And it was we had every week, Mike will remember this, Becca probably will, every week for the last 6 months, we would say, we've got to, in 2 more weeks, we got to push. We got to just pull if we get everybody out, 2 more weeks, we will get this thing at 2 more weeks. So we had a 2 more week promise for 6 months, and to get this thing finally done. And when we had, and the first time the inspector came through, he said he failed us, and I said, "Oh gosh," and and then we had to redo some stuff. And the inspector came back, and when he gave us, he said, "You're ready to go. You can move in 2.5 years after starting this project." And I'd said this so often: we're gonna remodel this building. If it kills me, we're going to remodel this building. We're going to get into it. This is going to be the place where HarborPointe's going to be going. This is, and when that guy said, "Here's your certificate of occupancy. You can use the building," I broke down. I cried. I just cried. I couldn't help it. I just cried. This is finally done. If it killed me, I was going to do it though. I was here every single day I could be here. And I tell you, I think that's kind of the gist of what's going on here. If I die, I die. I'm going to do this, though. This is what I've been called to do. But Jesus challenges us a little different way. And he says, it's not just if you die, but I want you to die. I bid you to die. I ask you to die. If you want to be my disciple, you got to die. You can't just go on living like normal. I'm asking you to die to your old way of living and rise again to a new way of living. I'm asking you to die. Jesus said this before he went to the cross. He said, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Early man, what did they do? When they saw seeds that were edible, what did they do? They ate the seeds, right? I mean, there's something to eat. And then somebody came along and said, I'm going to take some seeds and I'm going to put them in the ground. I'm going to let them die. Because if it dies, it's going to produce somehow some genius, some stroke of genius took place, because doesn't make sense, does it? That you take a seed and you put it in the ground. That's edible. And you put this, you don't want to die because this is all I have. And yet the message is, guess what? All of us are invited to a hanging party. We're to hang on the same cross that Jesus was hung. You see, Jesus went to a hanging party. The story of Esther is, in my mind, really, in one sense, the highlight is when she says, I'm going to die. There's more to that story, but Jesus highlights the fact that he said, the hanging is what it's all about. Come to my hanging party. And guess what? You're to come along as well. You die, guess what? You're going to produce fruit. If you die, there'll be fruit produced in your life. If you don't die, no fruit. You live for yourself, the weeds will grab hold of your life. And that's all you'll produce is weeds. You die, you produce fruit. So come to the hanging party. Let your soul be hung on the cross along with mine. Come to the hanging party. It's the greatest party we can be a part of. There's not a person here who is not here by God's appointment, who's in a royal position to serve in a special way. There's not a person here. It doesn't matter what we've gone through. It doesn't matter what mistakes we've made. It doesn't matter what sins we've committed. It doesn't matter what position we've achieved. It doesn't matter who we've hurt or who we've helped. God has us here for a reason. It's so that we might be able to say, Lord, here's my life. I'm following you to the cross. Here it is. I want to be hung on the cross along with you. I want to be on that hanging party. If I perish, I perish. And whatever you choose to do from there is for your glory. You know the story of Haman? He ended up, because he wanted to protect himself, he ended up in his own gallows. And that's the story of our life as well. We either choose Jesus' cross or we choose our own gallows. That's the story of our own life. Lord, I just pray right now that you help us. Help us to grow. Help us to be expanded in our understanding. Help us to see you more clearly and follow you more nearly and love you more than ever before. Help us, Lord, to let go of those areas that are just filled with weeds, seed weeds. Help us not to be following along with the crowd. Help us to follow you, to give you glory. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.